What is up, Bleacher Report? Jesse here coming at you with another 49ers daily. Draft is just a few weeks away. I'm getting so excited about it. Last time I did a show was about 2 weeks ago. And at that time, we did a mock draft. I think tomorrow we're going to do another mock draft, but we're going to do it allowing trades. Last time we didn't do any trades. But before we get there, more importantly, I think we should give a primer as to the types of prospects that the 49ers are going to be looking at number 11. What is realistic? Who can you expect to be there? Who are they going to be choosing between? Who's going to get drafted before them, most likely? And so, what I did is I went through about 15 different mock drafts from the guys that are supposed to be the pros at this, all the professional analysts. I went through top prospect rankings, everything, and I came up with 9 guys that I believe are almost assuredly gonna be gone. Now, that last player, pretty much in and out of a lot of mock drafts, no guarantee, but I think there's 9 players that are most likely going to be gone, and I'm gonna give those names, and then we're gonna go over another 9 players that the 49ers are going to be choosing between, and this draft is so interesting because, well, obviously, I think the biggest thing is the San Francisco 49ers have very specific needs, and this draft allows them to hit on those needs. The 49ers need a ton of defensive line help. And guess what? This is one of the, if not the deepest defensive line draft we have seen maybe ever. So that is massive for the 49ers. But also, I think outside of 8 to 10 guys, I don't know if there's more than that that are true round one prospect players. Now, every team has different boards, but you often hear, hey, this draft, there's 20 guys that we think are round one prospects, or there's 16 guys that we think are round one prospects. You may be picking at 31, which means the chances of you getting a round one prospect very slim to none. And that's how you have situations like last year where the 49ers at 31 probably had something like 20 first round prospects graded on their board. And you end up with Ricky Pearsall being picked, and you're going, whoa, hold on. Ricky Pearsall, I was mocking him in the third round. How did this happen? Where did this come from? Because after guys are off their board that are first round prospects, yes, you're making a first round pick, but you're going with a guy who is ranked high on your board that is not a first round pick, that is, you believe, is a second round pick or a draft need or what have you. So that's what the 49ers are looking at. I believe there are only 9 to 11 first round prospects in this draft. Now, NFL teams assuredly are probably going to be different. Maybe some will have more, some will have less. But with that being said, I truly think there's probably another 9 to 13 guys that are possibilities there for the 49ers at pick 11. So why don't we go through those guys? I'm going to go through 9 guys. 9 players that I think are the most realistic possibilities for the 49ers. I will give you the name of another 4 guys that I think are possibilities, but more long shots. But before we do that, let me go through what seem to be the consensus players that are almost assuredly to be gone before pick 9. Okay. Or excuse me, pick 11, rather, where the 49ers are at. 9 players. Here are the names, no particular order. Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami. Abdul Carter, edge out of Penn State. Shador Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. His teammate, Travis Hunter, DB slash wide receiver. Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. Ashton Genty, running back out of Boise State. Armon Membu, offensive tackle out of Missouri. Jalon Walker, edge slash linebacker out of Georgia, and Will Campbell, offensive tackle slash guard out of LSU. Those are pretty much the 9 names that almost all but are going to be gone by the time the 49ers are picking. So if that is the case, let's not talk about them. Unless the 49ers trade up, they're most likely not getting one of those guys. And if one of those guys happens to fall outside of, I would say, Ashton Genty, obviously the quarterbacks as well, Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, Ashton Genty. Outside of those guys, if a Travis Hunter falls, an Abdul Carter, a Mason Graham, an Armand Membu, especially, my gosh, Jalen Walker or Will Campbell, I think the 49ers have probably got to take that player. So that leaves 9 guys on my list of players that I think are likely to be there and likely players that the 49ers will be looking at. And the first player on that list is Shamar Stewart. So what I did was I went and found their PFF grade. And then I also am going to read an excerpt off of NFL.com as far as how they view these players and what they are saying about these players. And then if I have personally watched film on them, I will give a little bit of a tidbit on what I saw as well. So, Shamar Stewart, player number 1, Texas A&M. He's an edge, PFF grade of 79.5. Here is what NFL.com said about Shamar Stewart. Stewart is carved from granite, possessing a rare blend of traits, explosiveness, and untapped upside. He's long and sudden off the snap, but hasn't learned to weaponize his hands to control the point of attack and bypass protection with go to moves. His bull rush compresses the pocket off the edge, and he's too athletic for guards when reduced inside. He can be very disruptive in both phases, but requires additional training to start converting his opportunities into finishes. The lack of production relative to his traits is a concern still. Players who move like him are highly coveted. While the boom or bust label might be in play, it feels like a matter of time before it all starts to click at a high level. Now, I don't know what his comp is, but when I read that out loud, to me, he sounds like a player who was drafted very high, a player that was recently on the 49ers. I'll let you guess who that was, but a player that was here for a brief time and had effort issues and really just hasn't lived up to expectation. So I don't know if that's what Shamar Stewart's going to be. I don't know if what his work ethic is. I personally haven't watched him on film, but what I have heard is the production hadn't matched what the skill set is. If you just strictly go off of his testing numbers, if you go off of his physical stature, it's clear he's exactly what you're looking for if you're building a player in the lab, but he's not refined enough in a lot of people's eyes. And so there is a lot of risk with a player like that. Now, maybe he pans out, maybe Chris Kacirik. Obviously, we know that Nick Bosa, the best thing about him, even coming out of college, was he was an absolute technician with his hands and his moves and putting moves together. So maybe he can help Shamar Stewart out. But I think that's player number 1 that the 49ers are going to be looking at the edge position, Shamar Stewart. All right. Player number 2. Let me find him here. Hold on a second. Here we go. James Pierce Jr., another edge out of Tennessee. PFF grade of 87.1. Pierce, this is what they said about James Pierce. Pierce is a tight-hipped, linear pass rusher with explosive takeoffs and good speed to power, but a lack of bend to flatten at the top. His high pressure rate is partially derived from the instinctive feel for positioning, allowing him to work around protections and quick wins into the pocket. He's a very long but narrow through the hips, so the build out of his frame might be limited. Pierce knows how to play around the blocks and also has the speed to close and tackle, but his base is naturally narrow and lacks bend. He'll need to improve his strength and technique as an NFL run defender. Despite those concerns, Pierce's length, twitch, and rush production create a higher ceiling. I have actually watched James Pierce on film, and I pretty much agree with what is said here. But I also think what's not noted here is that I think he's probably better suited for a 3-4 defense. I think he's better suited in a 2-point stance where he can come off the edge, or in a hybrid, something like the Eagles do. In fact, when I saw him, I said to myself, this guy's an Eagle. He has Eagle written all over him. If he falls somehow to the Eagles at 32, I would be shocked if he wasn't picked by them. I don't know that he'll get there. I also think that he can play defensive end in a 4-3 style defense or edge rusher, what have you. But I don't think that that's where he's best suited. However, he did play a little bit of everything. You saw him in a 2-point stance, 3-point stance, 4-point stance, but he dropped into coverage. He's a very versatile player. He is light framed. Can he put on weight? Yeah, I think on the surface, when you see a frame that's 6'5" at that weight, you say, "Hey, he certainly can add weight." But as they talked about the way that he's built, there may only be a small limit you could put on that, maybe 8 pounds, 7 pounds, whatever, and that's just who he's going to be. So I think James Pierce is a good player. For me, when I watched him, he wasn't a oh my gosh, can't miss prospect. But again, I don't think in any of these guys we're talking about true first round grades for the most part. Maybe one of them. I think one, maybe two of them, but for the most part, I don't know that we're talking about first round graded players. So you're certainly not talking about perfect prospects, but you are talking about good players that I believe the 49ers are going to be interested in. All right, this next prospect has been really one of my favorite prospects throughout this whole process. And very early on, I mocked him all the time to the 49ers, and that's Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. PFF gave him a grade of 88.9. Here's what NFL.com said about Walter Nolan. It says Nolan has an NFL starting size, but won't blow you away with his physical traits. However, he gains quick advantages with his explosiveness into contact and ability to beat up blockers when singled up. He has the athletic talent to play into gaps, but needs to play with better hands to keep himself clean at the point of attack. He wins as a rusher with his athleticism and play strength and doesn't need to be schemed for. The pass rush still requires refinement, but he already flashes quick win moves that foreshadow good pressure and sack production as a pro. Nolan's blend of explosiveness and playmaking talent create high upside as a 3 down interior lineman. Walter Nolan is another player that I have watched. I am so impressed with Walter Nolan. Again, this is what's crazy about these prospects. We just talked about Pierce being a Philadelphia Eagle. Walter Nolan is being mocked anywhere from like 16 to 30, or excuse me, 11 to 36. It's a wide range for a lot of these guys. I think that there's a chance that a lot of these guys I'm listing here fall 20 or later, which makes this absolutely crazy. And when you look at a guy like Walter Nolan again, could you imagine him falling to, I don't know, the Baltimore Ravens or Philadelphia Eagles? It's like, oh geez, here we go. The rich get richer, the Buffalo Bills or something like that. I would love if he ended up in a 49er uniform. I think what I'm really finding out through this process is it would be best if the 49ers can trade back. Spoiler alert, that's what I'm going to look to do in tomorrow's mock draft. I just think if the 49ers have the possibility to move back, that would be the way to go. Maybe somebody like a Tet McMillan is there. other teams just have to have him, and so they're willing to give up a few spots. You can trade back to 15 or something like that, and you feel a lot better about taking these players at 15 or 17 than you do 11. But if you're there and nobody's willing to trade up, which is extremely possible, I mean, a lot of these prospects are probably graded pretty close. You just might have to take somebody. And I think Walter Nolan, for me at least, is a player that I would be very, very comfortable taking at 11, even though ideally I think trading back would be the way to go. All right, let's talk about Derek Harmon. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon, PFF grade 83.9. Here's what NFL.com says about him: position versatile, building block that makes moving the football a much tougher task. Harmon is a wide, long, and naturally powerful at the point of attack. He can create traffic jams inside as a two gapper or stunt and power his way into the backfield. He's unlikely to be a primary sack man, but he can be part of a swarm unit that batters the pocket. He's high cut and tight hipped, which limits his agility and reactive athleticism to finish. Harmon can play up and down the line in both odd and even fronts. He will bring an instant dose of stinginess, toughness to any defense that he joins. Derek Harmon, I have seen a ton of. I'm an Oregon Ducks fan. So not only have I watched him on film, but I saw him all season long in college. I like Derek Harmon. I do also have to admit, though, that early on in this draft process, a month and a half ago or so, when people were asking me about prospects and I was asked about Derek Harmon, what I said was, yeah, at 43, I think I would love to have a player like that, but I'm certainly not taking him in the first round. I still feel that way. I like Derek Harmon a lot. I think he's going to be a pretty good player in this league. But that being said, if it's him or Walter Nolan, give me Walter Nolan, no questions asked. Walter Nolan has a motor that doesn't stop on film. There were multiple times where you could see very clearly in the SEC that he was game planned for, double teamed on a very frequent basis. With Harmon, you can see that he's double teamed as well. But there are also games where he just flat out disappears. You don't even recognize him on the field. Now, that can be a good thing because it just means he's doing his job and other people are getting home, what have you. But the impact of what Derek Harmon brings on a consistent basis is just not there. I don't know that he'll be that big, impactful player at the next level. I think he'll be a solid player, much like it says here. He may not be a primary sack man, but he can be a part of a swarm. If you have a good overall unit, he's certainly going to be a high contributor. If you have him and let's say, I don't know, let's say they're able to get like a Princely or something like that. You pair him with Bosa and another pretty good defensive tackle later in the draft, he'll end up being a good player, a productive player if he's surrounded by other productive players, but he's not by himself going to be somebody who absolutely wreaks havoc, at least not early on. That's not the player that I saw game in and game out. So that's my take on Derek Harmon. If he falls to 43, which again, who knows with this draft, it really could go a lot of different ways. I would love Derek Harmon at 43. At 11, way too rich for my liking. But I do think the 49ers are absolutely going to be looking at Derek Harmon. They were at the Oregon Pro Day. I think it's very, very possible that they're looking at him at pick 11. So, that being said, I had to bring him up. Let's round out the defensive tackles here with our last player, Kenneth Grant. We're going up in weight with each of these guys. I mean, all three of the guys that I just showed you are around 6'4", but the weight just keeps going up and up and up. Completely different types of players between Nolan Harmon and now Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant received a PFF grade of 83.7. Here is what NFL.com said about him. Grant is a broad bodied nose tackle whose tape can run hot and cold depending on the game and the types of blocks he is facing. He struggles to anchor when hit with down blocks due to his narrow base and tall pads, but he uses his power and length to beat single blocks and split double teams when he finds the crease. He had some sack production in college, and we could see him improve in that area once he learns to create more rush space with his hands. Grant's game will finally come together in full when he's able to take his impressive physical attributes and impose his will on opponents. Now, I saw Kenneth Grant a game or two live. I have not watched film on him. I think he, body type wise, the 49ers, let's say they go with Walter Nolan, they do need another defensive tackle. I would love to get a body type similar to Kenneth Grant, whether that's 6'2" to 6'5", 325 to 345 range. I just think that you do need a big bodied player in this defense. When you run the wide nine, you do need a player who can eat up two gaps. I think Kenneth Grant can be that, but I don't think that Kenneth Grant is necessarily a three down defensive tackle. When I look at Kenneth Grant, I talked about James Pierce Jr., he had Eagles written all over him. When I see Kenneth Grant, I see a Buffalo Bill. I think if it's possible that he falls, I think they're at like pick 30 or something like that. I think Kenneth Grant would fit perfectly with what they need. I, like I said, would love to have that body type with the 49ers. I don't know that he would be my pick at 11, but the 49ers are absolutely considering him. I would be shocked if they were not. All right, let's switch positions and let's look at some of these cornerbacks here. We're going to stick with another Michigan teammate. We're going to go with Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. He earned a PFF grade of 76.5 this year. He's dealt with some injuries throughout his career and is currently dealing with some hamstring stuff. Here is what was said about Will Johnson. Teams love big, fluid cornerbacks with ball production, and that is exactly what Johnson offers. He's instinctive and plays with good body control and change of direction in space. He can play man coverage, but he is best when he is playing with his eyes forward instead of chasing routes downfield. Johnson displays good pre snap recognition and can read and anticipate routes, throws at a high level. While he plays the role of thief in coverage, he needs to balance that mentality with a healthy respect for NFL route runners, as he might lack the recovery speed to close the distance at a desired rate. He has coveted traits, and his areas of concern fail to stand out as impediments for what could become a long, successful career as a future Pro Bowler. I will say, I have not watched Will Johnson on film, but two of my dear friends who I trust wholeheartedly when it comes to college prospects and going through this process. One of them, Marco Martinez, I had right here on Bleacher Report with me about a month or so ago. Both have said if Will Johnson is there at 11, if he somehow doesn't or does rather make it to the 49ers, you've got to take him. You absolutely have to take him. There are no questions. It doesn't matter. Yes, the 49ers need defensive line help for sure, but it is a deep defensive line. This player is absolutely elite and also at a position of need for the San Francisco 49ers. Will Johnson is a prospect that they absolutely love. I know a lot of people love him. I only gave you 9 players initially that are pretty much assuredly going to be gone. Will Johnson is one of those other guys who's frequently going in the top 10 of drafts, may not even make it to the 49ers. However, if he does, don't be shocked if the 49ers take him because he is that good of a prospect. All right, let's stick with the corner position here. We're going to go with Jade Barron, one of my favorite players in this whole process as well. Jade Barron, a little bit of a different type of corner than Will Johnson out of Michigan. He's only 5'11", 5'11", doesn't have the frame that maybe Will Johnson has. He had a PFF grade of 90.7. Here is what was written about him. He's a big nickel. Big nickel was in the right place at the right time throughout his impressive 2024 season. Barron played smothering coverage underneath, fueled by route recognition, footwork, and play strength. His instincts allow him to pounce on catch points or tackle pass catchers immediately from the zone. However, he lacks recovery speed deep and can be a little too grabby at the top of the routes. In man, tackle technique and run support is a shade inconsistent, but looks easily correctable. The size and tape work in his favor as a physical nickel who can be an early contributor and a future starter with the potential to cross train as a safety. Okay. I like what they said about Jahdae Barron. I also think they're selling him way short, way short. If you are familiar with Brian Branch, who was a rookie last year for the Detroit Lions, they had a ton of injuries. Brian Branch and Jahdae Barron, build wise, are almost identical. Skill set wise, they are almost identical in the fact that they can play anywhere. They can play inside, they can play outside, they can play safety, they can play the star role, they play in the box. They are all around players in the secondary, absolutely Swiss Army knives. The difference is Brian Branch fell to round 2, and a big reason for that was because of his testing. He wasn't the most explosive athlete. Doesn't matter. He's translated into an absolute star in the NFL already. Jahdae Barron did test very, very high when it came to 40 time and what have you. So that being said, I've also watched Jahdae Barron on film. You can't take your eyes off of him. He's that incredible. And also keep in mind, I do think he's better as a nickel corner. I also like him in a safety role, a star role, what have you. But this year, because they had some injuries or lack of depth at Texas, he played outside corner for a majority of the season and did a very, very good job, even though that is not his best skill set. And even with that said, he won the Jim Thorpe Award as the best corner in college, playing out of position, essentially. That's how good of a player he is. So I love the blurb that they gave. I completely think that NFL.com is selling him short. For me, the two players I would love most out of the players that I'm talking about are either Walter Nolan or Jahdae Barron. I absolutely love both of them, would be happy with either one. And of course, we just talked about another corner in Will Johnson, just because I trust what my two friends have told me and knowing that they work their butt off when it comes to prospects, I also would be okay with him being there. But to me, holy crap, Jahdae Barron, early on, I mocked him to the 49ers at around pick 20. I had done a trade in a mock draft with the Denver Broncos. I don't know that he makes it to 20 anymore. Heck of a player. I would love to have him in a 49er uniform. We'll see what happens. But if he's the pick, I think you should be pretty excited. Let's go with a teammate of his at a completely different position here. We're going with Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle out of Texas. PFF grade of 86.2. What's interesting with him is that I think Kelvin Banks might be a guard in the NFL. That's the interesting thing with a lot of these guys. They might transition to guard. Now, he certainly could play tackle, but he might be better as a guard. We will see. Either way, I think he's going to be a good player in the league. Here is what NFL.com said about him. 3-year starter who has gone to battle in the trenches with current and future pros. Banks will come into the league as an early starter, but his run blocking is more pro ready than his pass protection. Kyle Shanahan loves this. He's technically sound and scrappy in the ground game with the quickness and athleticism to get to all move blocks. He has the leverage and strain to hold his own at the point. Banks has the slide quickness to deal with speed, but he must become more proactive in attacking power rushers and long limb attackers to prevent them from dictating the terms. He needs to improve his anchor and his hand placement, but he should become a longtime NFL starter either at tackle or guard. I think early on you can slide him in at left guard and he might be your future left tackle. So for me, I think Kelvin Banks, if he's there, he probably should be there. The 49ers are certainly going to be interested in him. So that is a player to look out for. Last but not least, let's talk about Jahad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. PFF grade of 81.6. Here's what NFL.com said about him. Campbell has the build and traits of an Alabama linebacker, but he might need to upgrade in some areas. He doesn't play with early instincts or play recognition and is inconsistent in challenging blockers and leveraging his run fits. Campbell uses his speed and athleticism to help mitigate mistakes and to the football at a relatively high rate, get to the football at a relatively high rate. He's a rangy, consistent, open field tackler who excels on third down as a fluid blitzer and impressive cover talent. The elite traits and athletic talent will be tantalizing, but the best way to utilize him might be as a full time 3-4 rush linebacker where he can play more proactively instead of reactively as an off ball linebacker. Now, Jahad Campbell is a player that a lot of people like. It seems like there's mixed reviews on him. A lot of people either really love him or just like, I don't even think he's the best linebacker that will be available there. I think there are second, third round prospects that are better than him. So people are kind of all over the board, but he is a very good player. Obviously, played in the SEC. We'll see what he ends up being as a pro. But if the 49ers are looking to get another linebacker, and they most certainly are, in fact, Kyle Shanahan said as much at the owners' meetings, not necessarily at pick 11, but they will be looking at all prospects and all possibilities there at pick 11. I think Jahad Campbell is certainly going to be in the mix. Now, there are four more players that I had. I'm just quickly going to rattle off their names. I think they are far less likely to be 49ers, but I do think there's a big possibility that they will be there. Again, I could see a couple of these guys also going in the top 10. It's a little bit all over the place, but Tet McMillan, Tet McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona, absolute stud. Do the 49ers go with another wide receiver? Sure, I guess they could. A lot of people would be upset, but as a prospect, he might be the best ranked prospect when they draft at 11. We'll see if he makes it there. I doubt, though, that he's as likely as some of the other names that I've given. Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. The 49ers certainly have been looking for another really good tight end ever since drafting George Kittle. George Kittle's price just went up today. Another big time tight end for the Arizona Cardinals. McBride just became the highest paid tight end right before I went live. That means the price of Kittle, if they are reworking his deal, certainly went up. I don't know what the 49ers are looking to do there, how long they're looking to wrap him up under contract. Tyler Warren might be a possibility, but I think that is fewer and further in between. And also, he could be a top 10 guy as well. Mike Green, edge out of Marshall, might be the most explosive edge in this draft. I think he was the highest graded player on PFF. Again, not that they're gospel, but I did want to throw that grade in there for everybody. Mike Green is an absolute freak show. That being said, there are some crazy off the field allegations and issues. I just don't know if the 49ers will be willing to take a chance on a player like that. You have to remember that the 49ers did take a chance on a player like that in their very first draft with the 49ers, and it didn't pan out. And ever since then, they have been absolutely taking clean guys who just don't have any off the field issues. Sounds like they've met with Mike Green. If they take Mike Green, then it's very clear they've done their research and they feel comfortable with what the off-field allegations are. I just ultimately don't think that he will be a 49er because of those allegations. We'll see how far he ends up falling because of them, but he will be there, I would assume, at 11. And the 49ers and a lot of teams are going to have a tough decision there because he is a very productive player in college and absolutely athletically fits the billing. And then the last player that I have listed here is a safety out of Georgia, Malachi Starks. Most people think he's the best safety in this class. Very, very good player, very versatile player as well. I don't know that the 49ers are going to go with a pure safety. However, Malachi Starks wouldn't be a bad option at 11. I have him there as a player that they will look at, but I didn't do a write up on him, much like I didn't do a write up on some of the other guys like Tet McMillan, Tyler Warren, and Mike Green, because I think they are much, much less likely to end up in a 49er uniform. That being said, Bleacher Report, thank you so much for having me. I will be back tomorrow doing a mock draft with trades on another 49er Daily. This is Jesse with Last Second Sports signing out. Peace.